Hello and welcome back to the Mediate podcast. At the moment, we've been slowly making our way through our Music Mates 80s series, where I pick an album from every year of the 80s. We go away and listen to them, come here and then talk about our thoughts together. The year right now is 1988. We've only got a few episodes left at this point. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed the series as we come closer and closer to the final episode. Today we have a legendary album from a legendary outfit out of New York, known for their groundbreaking hip-hop production and a militant, candid, say how it is attitude. It's taken an entire decade and 9 years to finally do some quintessential classic hip-hop on this channel, and it's finally happening today. But before, as usual, just a few honourable mentions first. Actually, today I think it's just going to be the one honourable mention. Just the one. So there's really only one album that I want to mention. It's called Daydream Nation, and it's an album by a group that's very close to my heart called Sonic Youth. And Daydream Nation, probably along with Purple Rain and Closer, are my favourite albums from the entire decade. And I could have picked Daydream Nation for this episode, but I didn't want to because I thought that the album that I have picked instead would be a little bit more fun to talk about. And I thought it would also poll better with you guys, which was kind of important to me. But having said that, Daydream Nation might be the album that, in sound, is closest to the kind of music that I would want to make if I was an artist in the industry. Just because I think it embodies, for me, what I like in great rock music pretty much more than anything that I've ever heard. It's an album that is really it's very dejected, it's very discordant and intense, and it has this just incredibly relentlessly noisy aesthetic, but then at the same time does a really great job tapping into these very spacious, very wishy-washy soundscapes, and the lyrics on the album really tend to complement that well too. And as usual with a band like Sonic Youth, you get something that's pretty full on, and could definitely turn away people after the first song. But you know, if you're interested in alternative rock music, if you're interested in the history of that genre, then you really need to go and check that one out. But on the other side of 1988, but in the same recording space as Daydream Nation, hip-hop was making some ground as Rick Rubin's Def Jam record label releases It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back, the second album by rap group Public Enemy, with vocals primarily from Chuck D, and stellar production work from the Bomb Squad, which consisted of brothers Hank and Keith Shockley and Eric Sadler. It Takes a Nation became an instant success in terms of acclaim, and in years since has been seen as kind of a landmark moment in hip hop, not just in its influence on just countless other artists, but also how inventive it was for the genre, and how it was used in some ways as a manifesto in music form for Black Americans in the late 80s. I've listened to this album a few times at this point, and considering it's part of that golden age of hip hop that was kind of coming out of the mid-80s into the early 90s, it's really interesting to see how the roots of the genre peaked here, and how it really played into my expectations of what early hip-hop sounded like. So that's kind of what I wanted to ask you guys first to kick things off. This is very clearly a rudimentary, very old-fashioned form of hip-hop hip-hop and rap music. And I know you guys don't really listen to this genre very much, but I wanted to see if that very unrefined old sound presented any kind of challenges, any issues for you, or if, on the other hand, you actually found it quite easy to get into and enjoy.
That is an interesting question, because I think there are certain elements of this album that definitely feel very, like, off their time. Like, I don't know how common doing like those big like record scratching like DJ sound effects are anymore these days. And part of listening to that was like, oh wow, this was like it's like listening to like old discos. Like there was a moment in time where this was the coolest thing in the world, and you seeing that sort of historic lens of what cool used to be is interesting. But there are other parts that I'm like, I don't like this at all, that I will get into. But yeah, it's definitely swings and roundabouts on the parts of it that have aged and the parts of it that are timeless, let's say.
I think I found this easier to get into than I was expecting, I think. I have now listened to this album, I think, 4 times, which is unheard of for me doing this podcast. Normally I listen to the albums at most twice, but no, this one I've listened to 4 times now. Which is not necessarily because I like it very much. We'll get into that, but like it's listenable. It is quite listenable, and I do think possibly, I don't know, my awareness of hip hop and rap is fairly slight. I mean, I can, if I want to try to impress people, I can say, well, I was listening to Eminem before I was 10, and I've seen oh dear, what's his name? You can see how well I know rap.
Yeah, you're off to a great start there,
Lamar. I've seen Kendrick Lamar live, so I'm cool. I'm down with the youth. I know what's hip and happening with the hip hoppers, as they, I'm sure, refer to themselves. But it was pretty listenable.
I'll tell you what, Andrew. As a white man, boasting about listening to Eminem before you were 10 isn't like. There's other artists you could have named there, but.
I mean, for me, there aren't, because I should say I listened to Eminem because I had a friend who had an older brother who liked Eminem, and I did not like Eminem. I did not like rap or hip hop. I thought it was awful music for terrible people. So. Yeah, I have mellowed on that belief over the years.
Yeah, Ethan, you bring up a good point about us as a collective. I think if you were to get any 5 people in the world and rank them on, like, based on looking at them, do they know what they're talking about when it comes to hip hop and rap from like the 1980s? We probably are like the worst 5. So I think I kind of appreciate our boundless hubris when it comes to taking us on.
Yeah. Well, now you know why it's taken me so long to actually put some hip hop on this channel. I've just been worried to hear what you guys are going to say.
Oh, it's going to be amazing. Yeah. It's going to be one for the history folks.
The closest thing we've talked about, I think, in comparison, is probably Do the Right Thing, right? Of just like a seminal work of like black art from like the late 80s. And obviously, Public Enemy of this era, are a massive part in that film in terms of the Fight the Power song. But yeah, it definitely feels like the perspective that we can talk about here is kind of limited, in that if anyone has found this YouTube video, I would simply recommend you watch some other people talking about this.
No, we've got a disclaimer out of the way. People know what they're getting into now.
I think one of the other damning things is so when me and Andrew were listening, I'd listened a couple times before, but for his first time, it was whilst we were putting together a Harry Potter puzzle whilst having tea. I don't think...
And chocolate biscuits.
Tea and chocolate biscuits, a Harry Potter puzzle, and listening to...
Yeah, it takes a nation of billions to hold us back.
I don't
the only correct way to listen to this album, I feel.
I don't think we could have been doing anything more damning.
We could have been playing croquet.
Yeah.
The way Flavor Flav intended.
Johnny, it sounds a little bit like you listening to Ennio Morricone's Ecstasy of Gold while packing your bags that one time. And I don't think anyone has ever put a Harry Potter jigsaw together while listening to this album, so you're definitely the first on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to hear your takes on that, because you are right in the sense that we're probably not the people that could come on here and talk about how groundbreaking and significant an album of this nature is, given our background and where we come from and our age as well. But I think also the same can be said about most of the albums that I pick and that we listen to and come and talk about them. What I'm most interested in finding out isn't for you to tell me all about all the research that you've done or anything like that. I just want to get your thoughts on how you feel about the music, what you enjoyed, what you didn't like, and I guess if you'd be interested in listening to more music in this genre. Also, actually, it's not the only hip hop album that we've done, because we did Childish Gambino's Because the Internet a very long time ago as part of the final episode of the 90s series. I know it's not a 90s album, but it was still the final one that we did. And as you can see, hip hop as a genre has evolved so much from 1988 to, I think that album was 2013 or 2014. And I think that's something that I really enjoy as someone who's gotten into hip hop kind of around uni and since uni. It's like you go back as far as these artists, and you kind of make your way through the 90s and the 2000s, and you know, you've got Dr. Dre coming along here, and Snoop Dogg, and then Eminem a little bit afterwards, and then Kanye comes along, and just seeing how all these incredibly successful artists have come along down the years and added their own highly personal take on the genre, and how that's influenced artists in years to come, especially with how R&B gets incorporated, and soul music and funk music and hip hop, and sorry, not hip hop, and rock, I meant to say. And with It Takes a Nation, a lot of the samples are kind of jazz based and funk based, and they're reassembled in such a way that just completely, it's just creating something new. And I think that's a big part of the appeal behind these sort of groups from that era, because they weren't particularly wealthy. They didn't have a lot of resources they could pull to make this music. They just kind of had almost like they just had the clothes on their back kind of thing. I'm going to shut up in a second, but I remember watching a really, really good video where I think it was either Hank Shockley or Keith Shockley, I can't remember which it was, but they were talking about how when they first started off in Public Enemy, all they really had from a production point of view was records, a turntable, a mixer and a sampler, and I guess a microphone. And you just had to create an album out of that's all that you had, and you can get these very, very creative ways of creating music. I know a lot of people think that sampling existing music to make new music isn't really music. I'm sure Ben Shapiro would have a lot to say about that, because I've heard his thoughts on hip hop and rap music, but you know, he's an idiot. So
well, I think he'd have stronger opinions on some of the lyrical content. The political messaging rather than the kind of the artistic form.
I don't know that his media analysis is strong enough to discern the what they're trying to say in the lyrics. I don't trust in his ability to decode even the most simple of metaphors, or indeed his ability to understand literal statements.
For a second then, Andrew, I thought you were going to say, we don't know if he's not a black nationalist. Which would have been quite a turn. The closest thing I think we've done is probably Rage Against the Machine. I know. Obviously, you brought up the Childish Gambino album we did, but in terms of some of the lyrical content, I think Rage kind of captures some of that. That kind of, I guess, righteous anger at the system, and I think in terms of the kind of themes and the things this album talks about, it definitely still resonates. And I think there's definitely a good mix of talking about like big systemic things, and then like things that are, I guess, out of date now, but are still kind of interesting to hear about. So I guess the way that Public Enemy are perceived at the time, the way that they're kind of accepted or rejected by popular culture, radio stations not playing them, and then some of the other songs where they talk about sampling and their kind of stances on that. So I found it really interesting to kind of engage with the lyrical content. That being said, I think I found Chuck D's lyrics really engaging and thoughtful. I can't say the same about Flavor Flav, but I guess he's throwing out a different kind of vibe.
He's the hype man at the end of the day.
Yeah, boy.
No, the real hype man is the BBC presenter that's in the first song. In the
Yes.
to us.
Yeah.
That's our
Who-
representation.
London.
The Harry
Yeah.
Potter puzzle representation.
He might have the most BBC presenter voice ever, which makes it such a stark contrast and an interesting setup for this album.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, like, I don't know, cool
By
things
interesting,
where
I
it's
mean-
just
I
like.
mean, I skipped it every time.
But I don't know. It's interesting to see that BBC were like, I say platforming them. I don't know. That's nice to see. I have no idea any of the context, but I was sort of like, that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned Chuck D, Harry, because for me, unquestionably, the highlight of Public Enemy, the thing that makes it so good is him and his vocal style. And I think just rapping in generally, from my experience, just listening to rappers, some people have it and some people don't. And I think you need a real sense of gravitas with your words. And I just think Chuck D, he's just so fantastic. Like, his sense of timing is great. The way he changes tempo mid-flow at times is great. The way that he stresses certain syllables and words to enunciate the rhyming scheme is also just great. Just every part of it. And I also think just naturally the way his voice sounds, with it being quite low and booming, really gives him that commanding presence as well on songs. I just think, he's inseparable. And actually, I remember reading something about Rick Rubin, who I think served as the executive producer on this album. When he started Def Jams, he was begging Public Enemy to come and sign with them after listening to Chuck D rap and just being kind of blown away at how good he is at it.
Yeah, I definitely agree that Chuck D, like, he has so much like impact in his vocals, and I don't want to discredit Flavor Flav's part of the creative process because I don't know how the lyrics were wrote, but I feel like from purely just how the vocals are constructed, Flavor Flav is hard carried by Chuck D, I would say. Flavor Flav's notable input being just like randomly inserting stressed "yeah boy" just seemingly for no reason.
But he does it very well.
Got old.
He has that one song. Cold
Got
Lantern.
old fast. Not good.
Yeah, I think I agree. I do quite kind of like the way the album's structured though, where you've got that BBC song, two really great I guess real opening tracks in Bring the Noise and Don't Believe the Hype. And then you kind of get Flavor Flav's single one, and then they kind of introduce you to Terminator X. You know, it has that like getting the gang together kind of vibe.
I do find it amusing though that they go with Don't Believe the Hype and then have followed up with two songs about how great two of the band members are. I wonder if that was an intentional little gag they put in, or
The other hype isn't good enough. This hype is the hype you should believe.
yeah, don't believe other people when they tell you how good I am. Listen to me when I tell you how good I am.
Who else would know better?
I think Flavor Flav does have some good moments on the album, even though his inclusions are definitely there's just a lot less of him on it than Chuck D. But actually, I think he's so important to the song Black Steel in the House of Chaos, which is my favourite song on the album. I think it's just absolutely incredible. It's just this really, really great song about trying to instigate a prison riot in order to escape from prison. And in between the verses, you have those moments where Flavor Flav is calling Chuck D from a telephone or something. And like his voice is very, very muffled, but like it's just so good. It's so good, and I think those kind of moments on the song really add a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that is great in that song where it's just trying to be like, hey, this is America. You know, you can't, you're going too strong. You can't start with that. I was like, that okay, no, I appreciate what this song is going for. That's a fun juxtaposition between the two.
I agree that Flavor Flav was better in the second half as well, because I feel like he does some interesting things in like the last two songs. I quite liked him in Prophets of Rage, where it felt like him and Chuck D were at like a more harmonious sort of balance. And then there's also the last one where they sort of do like a fusion dance and they start singing at the same time, and it's like, yeah, okay, I like that idea. So I definitely think that kind of leads into me sort of saying that maybe the second half, and we're famous for these first half, second half splits when it comes to our speaking about albums. Second half better. I'm throwing it out there.
Can I come in with a controversial breaking of the first half, second half debate?
Yes.
I like the start, I like the end, and for me it maybe dips in the middle a little bit.
You're breaking the formula here.
I know, I'm throwing something new out. I think that might just be because we're listening to a genre that is probably the most popular form of music now, and we're listening to a very early form of it. That while interesting, it does kind of get a little bit repetitive. In terms of, I guess, the songs kind of have an idea, and apart from the lyrical content, they do tend to kind of stick with that idea for 3 or 4 minutes. So I guess if you're jarring against something in it, whether that be Flavor Flav or something's just not working for you about the song, it does drag on a little bit. Not saying that the album's too long, but I think that's just because it's a very early form of kind of hip hop.
Yeah, right. I think that's a really interesting point, actually, Harry, because with this being as old as it is, you are kind of restricted by the technology that you have at the time. And I think as time goes on, technology improves. You have more music that exists that you can pull from to get ideas from. And what Andrew mentioned, Kendrick Lamar earlier on. Well, an album like To Pimp a Butterfly kind of blows this album out of the water from a production point of view, but that's just because of the kind of different time periods that we're talking about. And I share the same complaint with you. My biggest flaw with this album is that a little bit like a lot of funk music, which is kind of built on these like a very repetitive melody that plays for a certain amount of minutes, and then people kind of riff and jam on it. With this, you are very much getting a almost like a snippet of music that gets played for like 3 or 4 minutes, and there'll be the odd like scratch that comes in here and there, and that's the songwriting. And really, I think the thing that varies song to song that really adds a lot to this album is the rapping, as opposed to the instrumentals that, to some level, especially with this being an hour-long album, does get a bit stale. And the other thing that I also am not a big fan of, I like it on certain songs, is that there's this particular sound that appears on a lot of them that sounds like a high-pitched whistle, or like the sound of a kettle boiling. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about.
In Rebel Without a Pause, there's an E.
It's in so many of them. It's in so many of them.
I like that. I like it.
Yeah, it's good, but I mean, when you've got that sound playing every few seconds, and it's in pretty much all the songs, and it is very much like a, like it's I wish that
Semtex.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like a Semtex. I just wish it had been on fewer of the songs, and wasn't so like present, so in your face everywhere. I think those are kind of the sort of points to where I this album isn't quite as incredible as others, I guess.
I kind of agree with this idea that. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was just going to say I had a similar sort of bugbear, I guess, of not a high pitched noise. I didn't really notice that. I don't think, but it was the occasions when they used sort of remixed sections of people rapping or speaking, where they have it repeated over and over again. Most notably on the chorus for She Watched Channel Zero, where it's just
Shiwa,
and
I hate that.
yeah, it just
so grating.
it winds me up using remixed like human speech to make short little sounds and then replay it. It just bugs me. But anyway, that's says more about me than it does about the album. I think it's just something I don't like.
Incredible use of punctuation in that song title, though.
They could have used an interrobang,
Definitely.
and they didn't. They're cowards.
I don't think that had been invented back then.
I think you'll find interrobangs have a long and storied history of.
Do you think the interrobang predates both the exclamation mark and the question mark, and it's like a diverging sort of evolution?
I
need to separate out these uses.
I feel like I used to know if that was what happened, and I don't know for certain anymore. I suspect it comes after the exclamation mark and the question mark, but I do think the interrobang predates It Takes a Nation of Millions. I feel fairly confident saying that.
We should have done an interrobang podcast instead of a hip hop one with the expert. But yeah, going back to
I'll research
Harry's
up on it.
Sorry, Jono.
I'll research up on the interrobang for the next episode, so I can do an entirely pointless aside about the history and usage.
Yeah. What was your question, Tony?
I thought you were going to say something.
No, possibly, but now I've forgotten. I'm just going and looking at my notes. I know we've very briefly mentioned the intro hype countdown to Armageddon song, which I like, and I like it as a build up to the album. But it's just so weird to me that it just then fades out. Like it does all of this to like bring the energy, get you ready for, and then it just sort of peters off. And now we're in with a new song. It's like that. I don't know. that felt weird. Also has the line "The revolution will not be televised," which is I'm pretty sure comes from Gil Scott-Heron. Which whenever I then hear that at the start of this album, then makes me go and listen to some Gil Scott-Heron instead.
Yeah, I feel like my opinion of this specific version of the album that we listen to includes a lot of things that come from like a live concert recording. Like there's the
Tony, when you
intro.
say this specific version of this album, you mean this is the version of the album. There isn't
this
another
is the special
version of the
version
album.
because it's made by the playlist on Spotify is made by you, and that makes me think it's like a director's cut version.
It's just
a
the
special
songs,
remix.
just the songs off the original album.
It's because on the album on Spotify, it's just the deluxe version. I didn't want you to listen to like a 2-hour album, so I just wanted to make sure you had the original.
So this sort of concert stuff is like that's just in always in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's just like I guess you could call it a framing device of some kind. Like this idea of there being a concert that kind of intros a lot of these songs or plays in between them, I guess is supposed to be like an added level of whatever that is, I guess.
Yeah, I think I read as well that part of what they wanted from this album was something more lively for their live concerts, which they were really enjoying. So it sort of makes sense to me that it's bringing the live shows into the album in a way. And I think the other thing I was possibly going to say earlier is talking about just the difference in what you're building off and what you're building with at the time. I saw something to the effects that the way this all had to get edited together was all like meticulously by hand in a very arduous process. So yeah, putting together, stitching all of this in the way that's to make it sound like this is production-wise possibly took so much longer than the even more higher production modern things we get now. I could be completely wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about with those with the sort of recording and editing stuff of the time, but that's the feeling I sort of got reading about the production of this album, that was an interesting thing to get all these clips together basically. And then create these songs.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, Johnny. One of my favourite things to do on YouTube is there are people that have bought particular sampling devices that it was known that they were used by particular artists for particular albums, and then trying to recreate those songs by sampling the same songs they did and then putting them together in the way that the original song was done. I see it a lot with MF Doom songs, because MF Doom, who is another one of the all-time just great artists in this particular genre, a lot of his songs, whether it was by himself or working with producers like Madlib on Mad Villainy, they would just have like one device and then a series of memory banks and certain touchpads and dials that you would use to basically chop and change between the different songs that you'd sampled and saved onto this device. And that's how you would create music to then rap over. And I think, and this is like this is like early 2000s, mid 2000s, and this album is like over 10 years older than that. So obviously, technology, you kind of struggle. I think in some ways with a band like I shouldn't even call them a band because they're not really rock music, but a group like Public Enemy, I think in some ways there is probably a mystery that surrounds how a lot of these songs got put together, because as you said, it's like taking snippets and putting them together in an arduous, in a way that is probably very arduous and very DIY and very laboured. I know that specifically with drumming patterns, you would have drum machines that you would then have to program, or you would have to like take a very, very particular snippet of a snare drum being hit on a different song, and then a very, very particular snippet of a kick drum, and then a hi-hat, and then that's how you create the drums for your album. You don't have a session musician come in and play the drums for you. You take the individual hits of different parts of a drum kit on pre-existing material, and then using that and merging them together to create these very, very cool, in some ways quite stereotypical drumming patterns that you can then use to then build on top of and then create music, which is why I think this is an art form, even though I know, as I've said earlier on, a lot of people just think that sampling is like lazy, but no, it's very, very cool, and you can create some of the greatest songs of all time doing it.
I saw with one of the songs, I can't remember now which one, but it had Terminator X. The backing that he did is like him live for the whole song, getting the rhythm and just sticking to that rhythm. It was, I don't know, the thing I was reading was just at the point of just how good he was at I don't want to just keeping in time, because that feels reductive, but his sort of backing, although it's easy to sort of think about Chuck D and even, mock Flavor Flav, it's sort of more immediately obvious what they're doing, whereas I think Terminator X does a lot to keep everything there, and then make the songs.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you guys kind of talked earlier about how you're not a big fan of like using remixed vocal parts to create something that's kind of melodic enough to be a piece of music. I find all those details very, very cool to listen to and find out about. And like all of the different kind of skipping techniques and scratching sounds that you get. I know that on this album in particular, or I think Public Enemy's music in particular, one thing that they kind of pioneered is this thing called the transformer scratch, which you get from spinning a record forward and backwards at different speeds, and then using the crossfader, which is the thing that you have on your turntable set that allows you to change between two records that you currently have sat on either record mats. And like hearing stuff like this and then thinking about how in 1988 this is what they were doing to create, I guess, effects, is just so cool. And it all feeds into this thing that I was talking about to do with innovation and like being so creative when it comes to finding new ways to create new music and new effects. And I love all of that. I think it's so fucking cool. I really do.
Yeah, it's definitely very technically impressive, and I think a lot of my favorite moments, like on the instrumental side of this album, are when they do something really, really out there with how they remix a sound. Like there's one, I think the Terminator X one, Terminator X to the Edge of Panic, where it starts with like a remix of like that Flash song,
Yeah.
and it like cuts it
Yeah.
up and spaces it out. Like that's the stuff that I almost like the most, and I'm like, man. Well, I really do like the Chuck D vocals, but I feel like, man, I could listen to more just like weird remixes where they like slow down and speed things up at different rates of just other songs, because they clearly have the skill.
I've
for
listened to that Terminator X to the Edge of Panic 4 times now. Each time when the bit of the clip of the intro from Flash starts, cutting out and skipping, I think, oh god damn, the internet's going again. And then I remember, no, this is what this song sounds like. I'm just too used to the original song, I guess, that I can't not hear it as that song going wrong, rather than it being that song being, artistically influenced into being different.
I sort of flip between thinking that was cool and just sort of being like, ooh, that actually sounded quite grating. But I think that's how it can be with a lot of these sounds. And there's things where I know, although the way they sort of come across in this can get a bit irritating and grating, I think I dare say is a lot more groovy for other people. I don't know. They're doing interesting things and pushing it. There's cool and interesting things.
Do we have any favourite songs? I know you said Black Steel into the Hour of Chaos, rather. Sorry.
No,
really
it's
like
actually
that one as
House.
well.
Black Steel in the House of Chaos. I think is.
I can't read my own handwriting.
I think Black Steel in the House of Chaos, and you guys can disagree with me if you want. I think this song
is the hour.
so obviously the best song on the album. Is it?
Yeah.
Black Steel I thought it was Black Steel in the House of Chaos.
In the Hour of Chaos.
Oh my goodness.
Oh god, I love the
Vindicated.
song so much that I actually don't know the title of it. Sorry, Tony, I shouldn't have corrected you.
It's okay. But either way, I really like that one. I think that's one of the longer songs on the album, but I feel like it really kind of justifies it with this kind of this prison break narrative, and I feel like the overt political statements that are made throughout both this song and a lot of them just sort of add to the impact of the vocals of like Chuck D basically giving like a very like straight up like denial or like fuck the carceral state, makes it like a really engaging listen. But also I really like the one right before Night of the Living Bassheads, and also Louder Than the Bomb, so I'm kind of stuck on choosing a favourite.
I think those are all good ones. I really like Rebel Without a Pause for quite a few reasons, and I think it's all part of like it's all part of the charm that comes with listening to older music, especially music that is as primitive as Public Enemy's, and I don't mean that in like a reductive way. It just is, a very early example of something that will grow and grow and grow. But the thing I love about Rebel Without a Pause so much, and I know it's like super dated, but it's that part towards the end. There's like that breakdown section where they're saying like, bring that beat back, bring that beat back. You all want to hear that beat, right? Bring that beat back. I absolutely love moments like that so much because, I just think they're so fun and enjoyable. And I remember when we were coming back from a trip to Leeds that one time. This might have actually been the last time we went up, and we were listening to a Beastie Boys song that I put on the playlist that is again kind of similar era to this. I think one of you guys joked about finding it hard to take this kind of music seriously. And I definitely get that. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but I just love how, as serious as an album like It Takes a Nation is at times in its themes, I still think it's almost playful, at times with moments like that. And I just think those sort of moments are very cute,
Yeah, one of my favourite things, and also I think showing some of their playfulness, is their song titles. um, I mean, Rebel Without a Pause. I don't know. I enjoy. You're changing one word from Rebel Without a Cause, and then you've created this new and interesting idea. Similar with the swapping round in their final song to make it "Party for Your Right to Fight," which I think is also kind of, I don't know, just that as a sentence or statement is I don't know, part of what they're doing, because they are approaching this revolutionary space from music, from dance, from party, or all of that. And so I don't know, just that as a sentence, a title is interesting. Caught, Can I Get a Witness?
The contrast with the Beastie Boys as well. Sorry, just the fact that they flip the Beastie Boys song. Beastie Boys, who I think part of the reason I don't take them as seriously, even though I do enjoy some of their music, is that they are kind of posers. In a sense, they're very revolutionary for hip hop, but I guess they lack the lived experience to talk about the things Public Enemy talk about. I guess there's a kind of political slant to Public Enemy's music that appeals to me much more than the three middle class Jewish kids that are Beastie Boys, singing about eggs.
I mean, there's a reason Peep Show made jokes about the Beastie Boys and didn't make jokes about Public Enemy. And I think that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, this wasn't also the massive hip hop. This wasn't the only massive hip hop album of this year. Actually, another one called Straight Outta Compton, which is the debut album by NWA. And that was kind of really the sort of start of the whole US East Coast and US West Coast divide, which kind of went on for a very, very long time, and sort of defined sounds. You had artists like, Public Enemy and Nas kind of representing the East Coast, and on West Coast you had, people like Ice Cube and Dr. Dre and the guys that were in NWA, and both sort of started to develop their own kind of very singular styles, and it's just very, very fascinating learning about all of this stuff from history. I think that's a big part of why talking about an album like It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back I find so exciting. I love reviewing these kind of albums on the podcast, and it's part of why I love listening to old music full stop. It's just because what you're listening to, if you just forget about how important and significant all these records are, it's also the fact that the timbres of music are so different across multiple decades, and there's so much character that comes with that. I think of albums if you're going even further than this, further back, albums like Abbey Road, any Beatles album, or any Hendrix album, Are You Experienced, whatever, or any album by the Velvet Underground, all of these wouldn't be anywhere near as likable for me if they sounded quote unquote modern. I think the appeal for It Takes a Nation and all the albums I've just mentioned is they're a bit rougher, they're a bit more analog sounding, the production quality is a bit more scuffed, because of the limitations of the times, and you just feel like you're at the start of something that will only become more and more and more with time. I think it was actually Tony on the last episode that we did where he talked about how the Joshua Tree feels like listening to an artifact or a relic from time, and I thought it was funny that he said it back then, because in some ways I think the Joshua Tree is the most modern sounding album that we've done of all of the 80s, whereas this, for me, it very much is a sign of the times, but that's part of what makes it so awesome,
Yeah, definitely, I agree. It's nice getting that little slice of history,
Definitely. Was there anything else anyone wanted to talk about? Any other kind of points, songs, stuff they wanted to mention that they liked, disliked at all?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple lines that really stuck with me. In Louder Than a Bomb, when they say oh yeah, the CIA killed Bundy Luther King and Malcolm X, and it's like, yeah, true. Appreciate that. And the beat is for Yoko Ono in Bring the Noise. I don't know if the beat is for Yoko Ono. I don't really know what the beat is in the abstract sense. Don't know if that, swing and a miss. Yeah, I wish I had recorded more like really good lines that I liked, because there's a couple moments where I was like, oh man, they really tie like this the flow of the song together. What were you gonna say?
I think just the sort of, I don't know, shouting out inspirations in that moment, and Yoko Ono as one. Yeah, I think the only line I wrote down was one from Flavor Flav's stuff, which was in less a celebratory way and more just a what I think where is it in my notes? Yeah, flavor. Your breakfast is the flavor. Truly, greater words have not been spoken. He goes on to say something about dinner and how that's also a flavour. So I am just taking one line. I'm not giving it the full context. He does mention other meals, but just the breakfast is the flavour. I think it's because when I'm listening to that song and I get to that point, I'm just like, wow, we've got to this point.
Well, you see, it is funny that you have decided to, like, the one line you have decided to actually quote is a Flavor Flav line, because it is the same for me. I have also decided to quote a Flavor Flav line, but this one, not because I think it is silly, but because I actually thought it was kind of funny, which is the line, you could put that in your Don't Know What You Said book, which he says it better than I just did, but I like that. I do like that there are moments in this album where I think it usually is Flavor Flav, like, either suggests that the listener won't really understand what's being said, or there's another bit in, I can't remember which song it is now, but there's one where Chuck D has been saying a bunch of things, and then Flavor Flav chimes in with like, hey, could you slow down? I didn't understand all of that, which is, I don't know, clearly him joking, but also is a reference to people not understanding the meaning of their lyrics, which, as someone who did not always get all of the references they were making, resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. I actually think my favourite lines on the album are in Black Steel. I think that opening verse in particular, I feel like I just know it off by heart because I've listened to it so many times, and I love that opening part where he says, I got a letter from the government the other day. I opened it and read it. It said they were suckers. They wanted me for the army or whatever. Picture me giving a damn. I said never. Oh my god, it's so good. I love that. I feel, and the rest of the verse is brilliant as well. Like I'm not even kidding. The lyrics in that song are just fucking out of this world good.
Yeah. If anything, that's kind of, it makes it harder to pick out, like, oh, this is a really good line, because like an entire section will be so good that finding one like rhyme that you really like is so tough. Going back to earlier, I really like that when you mentioned about like kind of not understanding things. I feel like that's kind of part of the appeal, is that if you go through and like look at the lyrics and be like, I wonder what political figure that they're naming in Show 'Em What You Got is. I wonder what their deal is, and you can search the name up and be like, oh, they were a Jamaican like rights activist. That's pretty cool. So I was like, I'll keep doing that. And then I looked at the next one. She watched Channel Zero. I wonder what Channel Zero is a reference to. Turns out it's a 2016 American horror like sci-fi original TV show, cancelled after 4 seasons. Apparently it's pretty good from the reviews and the tomato score. So yeah, that's just a little nugget of information that I learned, and it's very funny recontextualizing the song of She Watched Channel Zero, everyone's saying it in this like hushed tone, and it's like, yeah, it's a sci-fi original horror like anthology. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe it.
I've been me and Andrew's experience of googling one of the names was like, that is a controversial anti-Semite
Yeah.
Like
Leader of the Nation of Islam. Looking up Louis Farrakhan because he gets mentioned twice in some of the early songs. Because I'd vaguely heard his name before and was like, I have some awareness of who this guy is, I think. What did he actually do? And then, oh, damn, that man's Wikipedia page is a journey. But yes, anyway. Going back to She Watched Channel Zero, just in, final things. Probably my least favourite song of the album, just because on initial listens I thought this is making quite an interesting point about the dangers of television, the sort of dumbing down of the population in general, and then on re-listens and on going over the actual looking up the actual lyrics, it seems like they are just talking about one woman in particular. Because they mentioned at the beginning a particular woman who's she's very attractive, she'll make you forget your girlfriend, but she's dumb as hell because she watches soap operas. And I tried to get her to watch the Super Bowl, and she's like, no, I want to watch soap operas. And it's she's just stupid because soap operas aren't real, and you should read books and stuff. And it just comes across as kind of mean-spirited. And yeah, it's just I thought you were making a powerful political point, and it turns out no. There's just this hot woman who is boring because she watches soap operas, and
that's the struggle.
I don't know that was worth writing a song about, guys. I think maybe you could have put a different spin on that.
Reads less punching up to the people making the TV, and is punching down to you've watched TV.
You've fallen for the entertainment that's been made to entertain you. You should go out and do things that you don't immediately find interesting, because maybe you'll get more out of it. And it's I don't know if this is helpful.
This reads kind of misogynist.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're cancelling Public Enemy.
Johnny and Andrew, what did you actually think of the album? Did you like it?
I think should we move on to scores as we kind of get to our final thoughts? Did we like it?
Yes, I think.
Okay, fine. Do you
'Cause
want to go first then?
Yeah. Start with us. I think going into it, the Public Enemy songs I knew were not ones on this album, and I think the other ones I knew were stronger than the songs off this album. Or at least that's my feeling. There's good stuff in it, but I feel a Lost is kind of lost on me in some ways. Or I think I was expecting more when I sort of read that this was they were being more energetic for their live shows. I was but it didn't feel that. I don't know, I didn't feel that kick or that energy that I was expecting from it. So yeah, there's good moments, but a lot of it gets sort of stuck on the same idea for too long. I don't know, I know there's great stuff in Black Steel and the Hour of Chaos, but also it's 6.5 minutes long of the same kind of sound. And I think that's, I don't know, a good example to some of my sort of conflict with this album. And I think I have to fall in the middle and give it a 5 out of 10.
Fair enough.
I am going to give it 6 out of 10, slightly higher than Jonathan. I did enjoy it. I thought it was it was good. I mean, again, I listened to it 4 times, which is more than I've listened to any of the other albums for this. It's perfectly listenable, but none of it moved me like I thought it might. While some of the songs are, I did enjoy. I think it's something I've realised just now, which is I found it more moving to read the lyrics for Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos than I did to listen to Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, which I don't really know what that means, if that means anything, but the song just, I don't know, somehow didn't have the same power that the lyrics have on their own.
That's interesting.
That's an L take.
I'll slide into this upward gradient with my score. I really wasn't certain about this at the start, especially with, in my opinion, the fact that this album doesn't have a great beginning to it, and also the fact that through my first listen I was like, mostly because of the sameness of the sounds that my first listen through, I was like, were there any standouts? Was it even good at all? But it definitely grew on me a lot, and I came to really like the sort of, honestly, from like Louder Than a Bomb onwards, it sort of has this like, through Chuck D, this like, the vocals have this like unrelenting impact to them, which I really enjoy, and I do like that sort of, like the political messaging through it feels so in your face, and like in your face but also like true. Like, it's not just in your face and also just like bland and obvious, it's like in your face and also like cutting in a way that some like things like Fred Durst isn't. So yeah, I really like that, and honestly, even Flavor Flav, you know, you love to hate him. He's annoying at sometimes, but he comes in as like a good like supporting annoying sidekick character for Chuck D at certain moments. He's the Jeff the Shark of this album. So yeah, I'll give this a good 7 out of 10.
Oh, pressure's on me now to give it an 8. It would be funny if Flavor Flav and Morrissey worked on a song together. Yeah, I think me and Tony do have very similar takes on this. In terms of our general vibe and score, because I'm going to break the upward gradient and also give it a 7. However, I think I do like the start of the album more than he does. I mean, we've talked a lot, we've shat on Flavor Flav a lot. I don't dislike what he's bringing. Obviously, Chuck D I think has aged better, but it does give me a chuckle every time he throws out one of his "Yeah Boys." You know, yeah boy. And don't believe the hype. The way his like voice loops on that chorus it's you could say it's annoying, but it's also been in my head for about a week, and I just keep singing it. Yeah, I think there's some really strong lyrical content. I think Chuck D's great. I think a lot of it has aged really well. But as I've said, there is just that kind of inherent like this is like the building block of a genre. This is like watching like this is the rap equivalent of watching like the 1920s Nosferatu film. You know, we are like, I can appreciate what it's doing at the time. You know, German expressionist shit, but there are better things to come, I guess. So yeah, I think I'll concur with the 7.
Cool. I'll finish off then as usual. So I've pretty much said everything I wanted to about It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. I'm a really big fan. As I've said before, I love going back and listening to the early sounds of genre that I've grown to really love and appreciate over the last few years. And this one is for sure a big hitter. It's a heavy hitter. It's got really, really great rapping. Like the raw production really stands out and appeals to me, and it's just very, very forward-thinking music. I am going to give it a strong 8 out of 10. I think that the things that hold it back are some of the sameness across a lot of these songs that you've talked about. And a couple of other things. I do think the pacing of the album could have been a little bit better at times. There are certain songs like She Watches Channel Zero that could have been excluded to make the track listing a bit tighter and a bit better. It does kind of lose me in the middle point a little bit. But the really good news is these last few episodes that we've been doing, we've started off low with The Queen Is Dead. I mean, like, really low. But we're slowly getting back to those very high standards and aiming for a big finish. At least from my point of view, anyway. So I'm really looking forward to doing 1989, and then I'm really looking forward to doing a very special episode afterwards to wrap things up. So yeah, we will see you then.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, boy!